There is a 5% chance of rain today, and it's starting to rain a little bit. Let's just say that Watt doesn't like that at all, so we're a bit stressed about how things are going to go. Hi everyone, nothing went as planned. There you go, that provides the tone for this video. Today I'm going to show you how I built and insulated the roof of my container house. At first I was planning to give you a step-by-step tutorial of everything I wanted to do. But I had so many adventures and experiences that I thought it would be more interesting to give you an overall feedback on my experience. I will present to you step by step everything I did. It's like a tutorial, but more focused on providing feedback about my experience and explaining how the project progressed. What did I learn from it and what mistakes should you avoid? I think that's more interesting. And there you go, to put you in context. On my 4 used shipping containers, I decided to rebuild a frame. To make a flat roof with a double slope, I decided to make it green. And to insulate it with cellulose wadding. So far, nothing too complicated, but I completed this project in late October and early November. At a time when it rains all the time, there you go, and that changes absolutely everything. You'll see. Hi, I'm Julian Malara. And this is my house, a container. I'm 26 years old, I have no do-it-yourself skills, but I set myself the crazy challenge of building an eco-friendly and affordable house. I'm also trying to develop my resilience and live in harmony with nature. I'm recording and posting this on my channel, so subscribe to follow the adventure. Since this is a feedback video, I didn't write a script for it. I took a lot of notes, so I'll be looking at them a bit while talking to you. So we're just here chilling. This isn't a scripted video. We're going to talk face to face. Sometimes I'll improvise for way too long, so Teo will cut me off during editing. Or maybe you'll leave this video because you'll be thinking, what is he doing? Julian, get to the heart of the project. Yes, let's get started. Here we go. Why did I want to make a flat green roof? Of course, a green roof is always flat. Why? Let's start with why. And the first reason is for the ease of construction. I thought to myself, working on something flat, it will be much simpler than making a classic double-pitched frame at height because, you know, working at height, having to lift the wood, that would have required either a lot more people or a lot more machines. I didn't really feel up to doing it. And then, same thing, a sloped roof means I would have had to make triangular cuts to install my siding, whereas with a flat roof, it's much simpler. That allowed me to make something cubic. Beyond the aesthetic aspect, which I really liked, I felt like it was simpler, just the feeling. You're starting to see where this video is going, right? Second reason, the price. I innocently thought a flat roof will surely cost less than a sloped roof, because whether it's this much wood or this much wood laid flat, you need less wood when you build a flat roof. We'll see later in the video if I was right, but in any case, that was my initial assumption. And all the container houses I had seen, all the ones I made reports, videos, documentaries about, all of them had flat roofs. So I thought, well, there's a pattern. I think it's the right idea. I'm going for it. So why add plants? Because at City Hall, when I asked for a flat roof, well, they told me no. So I told them, yes, yes. Actually, there's a law that says if I add plants, you have to accept it. And beyond this little thing with City Hall, adding plants really speaks to me because it brings thermal benefits, it brings ecological benefits. So it's something that makes sense in my project. And so that was the whole part. Why did I want to make this green flat roof on my container house? Now, let's get to the heart of the matter. How do we start with the first step, building the framework? So the framework, I started with the help of my structural engineering office, which helped me calculate where I needed to distribute the weights. I started by building 3 beams on the 3 most reinforced spots of the containers, or ones that I reinforced myself by adding steel posts. These cross-section images clearly show it to some extent, but the framework only rests on 3 spots. It doesn't rest on all the containers. Which means that inside, I didn't necessarily need to put support columns everywhere, so that's already convenient. I built these 3 beams with planks measuring 75 by 225, and I stacked one on top of the other like that. I had 45 centimeters of height, which was the necessary height to put the insulation between these 3 beams. I used 50 planks again, so 75 by 225, which go down in a double slope. Actually, 25 planks on the left, 25 on the right. Why planks? Because I have 5 meters between each beam, so for a length of 5 meters. Well, in this case, the Unified Technical Document, the Unified Technical Document tells you that you need planks, and it's planks. I made sure it has a 5% slope because we say it's a flat roof, but actually I made a double-pitched roof with 2 slopes at 5%. And it's planks! I attached them to the side beams with brackets that I screwed into the beams, and on the central beam I placed them on top and screwed them in diagonally into that beam. The idea was to hold everything together as best as we could. So now we have this whole frame structure, and we're also going to close off the entire perimeter of the roof with oriented strand board, 15 millimeters to create a parapet, just to hold the insulation that I'm going to put between this frame. The difficulties on this job site were already getting the beams up onto the roof. Because a beam weighs between 30 and 40 kilograms. So you might think, is that okay? 30 to 40 kilograms isn't that heavy. Yes, but the beam is 5 meters long and you have to lift it from the bottom of the container all the way up to the roof, which is 3 meters higher. And there were 50 beams to lift. So I have to admit, it took quite a while to carry them up one by one, until I had them delivered by a delivery guy, King Merlin. Thanks to them, by the way, a delivery guy, King Merlin, who came to deliver my siding, and who, by the way, took the opportunity to carry the planks up to the roof. So I think it saved us a day's work. So thanks to that delivery guy, he'll know who he is. The second step was to place all the planks into the brackets. There you go, we placed the planks into these brackets. In your opinion, how long did it take us? Here, you can see the time lapse. For those who know how long a drone battery lasts, the time lapse shown here spans just under 30 minutes. We spent 30 minutes. We were all in, there were 3 of us. Theo, the editor, Baptiste, the cameraman, and me, Julian, the YouTuber. We set up the 50 beams without screwing them in, placing them for the time lapse in 30 minutes. In the end, it was quick, but we took an hour break due to exhaustion. And then, once we had all those beams, we screwed them into the brackets, we screwed them into the central beam, and most importantly, we sanded the top of the beams, on the main beam, the ridge, the highest point of the roof, so that the oriented strand boards we'll put on later will slide better. But I'll explain that to you in a moment. It took us 2 days to install all the beams and screw in the joist hangers. And then, to put all the joists in place, screw them into the hangers, sand them and all that, it took us another day. So that's 3 days to build the framework. Now that the framework is ready and it's resting on the reinforced parts of my shipping container, it's time to insulate between these beams, and I've decided to use cellulose wadding, which is recycled newspaper. The idea behind this setup is that the container, since it's made of metal, acts as a vapor barrier. Then, on top of that, we blew in the cellulose wadding. So we had Theo down at the machine, taking the blocks of cellulose wadding, blocks weighing 14 kilograms, tearing them apart, putting them into the machine, which shredded the wadding and then blew the wadding through a hose. I had that hose in my hands, on the roof, and I was blowing the wadding. And the goal was to fill 45 centimeters across the entire roof to get a thermal resistance of 9, which is a very, very good thermal resistance. Normally, I think the minimum I had to put in was R7, and I did R9. There you go. And actually, there were times when I put in 50 centimeters instead of 45. Let's say my roof is very well insulated. To explain why I chose cellulose wadding to insulate it. As I told you before, because first of all, it's practical. That is to say, really, there was no need to cut panels or install them, you just had to blow it in. It filled all the curves and allowed it to fit the entire shape of the container's framework. Then it's because it's an eco-friendly insulator. Eco-friendly because it's recycled newspaper, that's it. It's an insulator that's very efficient. It has a very good lambda. It has a very good phase shift. I invite you to check out my video on what is the best insulator. It's a very good insulator. Cellulose wadding is one of the cheapest insulators available, costing nearly nothing. There's straw, which is really cheap, but after that there's cellulose wadding. I could have insulated with straw, but straw is very heavy, and since here, the straw rests directly. Well, since the insulation rests directly on my containers, I needed a lightweight insulation. So cellulose was much more interesting than straw, but on the other hand, it brings its own set of little difficulties. That is, as I told you in the introduction, I did this project at the end of October, beginning of November. So end of October, beginning of November, that means it basically rains every other day. On the roof, it started to dry a bit, but you can see there are still big puddles of water. There. I'm definitely going to have to buy a huge tarp to cover the whole roof just to protect it and make sure it's really dry so that when I put up my framework and insulation and all that, there won't be any moisture trapped inside. The problem is, it would normally evaporate, except the weather is really bad right now. So, I might have to use my vacuum that can suck up water just to make sure everything is really dry. Before I start my framework, the problem is, I'm only getting my tarp next week, so there will still be water on my roof until then. And it doesn't drain anymore because I made it watertight between my containers. So there you go, if you want to come for a swim, I have a pool at my place. I closed off my entire roof so when it rains, the water stagnates and it makes a pool. We vacuumed the roof around 10 times. It was a hassle. The idea was to not have more than 20% humidity in the wood, so this solution of vacuuming the water was temporary. We quickly realized that I needed to buy a tarp. To cover the roof between each day of the work, to keep things as dry as possible until I completely closed up the roof. The tarp adventure was quite an ordeal. It's a story that could fill a half-hour video on its own, but I'll sum it up for you. My roof is 10 meters by 12 meters. So I need to find a tarp that's about 12 meters by 15 meters, so I can go back up on the ridge. Listen to me, that doesn't exist. Everywhere I looked, impossible. Tarps larger than 10x 12 feet don't exist. Even 10x 12 tarps are very rare. Joining two tarps together made me uneasy. I believed the seam between them would never be properly done. It was crucial that no water seeped through, and some undoubtedly would. I found a tarp on a site I won't name that was 12 by 15. Hallelujah! It cost me $100. 100 euros for the tarp. Yeah, they're not messing around, 100 euros. I ordered and set up this tarp, but it only lasted one night. That's when you arrive at your worksite and think to yourself, that's strange. There was a tarp here before. I had put the tarp, yes, that tarp over there that's flying away. And you say to yourself, I feel like something's messed up here. But there's no tarp on that side anymore either. The framework is exposed to the open air, despite my intention to protect it from the rain. How bad is the damage? I hope the tarp isn't torn since it was expensive. Fuck. The poster got torn overnight. I came back the next day and saw it torn. You can see the footage I filmed on my Instagram. Follow me there, by the way. The tarp only lasted one night, wasting 100 euros. I'm back to searching for a tarp. And I come across a tarp at Kilutu that's 10 meters by 12 meters and it looks thicker. But there are no technical details about this tarp and I can't see it in the store, almost no one has it. I have to order it kind of trusting Kilutu, who has no idea what they're selling. Apologies if we partner later, Kilutu. In some of your stores, the salespeople don't understand what they're selling. They sold me an unknown item for 130 euros and it was a complete guess. Again, this tarp, and this time it's 10 meters by 12, so the problem is 10 meters by 12. The thing is, the tarp doesn't go up over the edge. If it doesn't go over the edge, the water runs over the tarp, seeps into the oriented strand board and soaks everything anyway. So I had to buy a rain barrier, which I stapled all around the edge and then put the tarp on. I have to admit it worked, the gamble paid off, it really helped me out. I managed to protect my roof and keep the moisture in the wood below 20%. And above all, once I put in the cellulose, this tarp will allow me to protect the cellulose. While waiting to complete the roof, it's a real ordeal. I couldn't sleep at night anymore, constantly dreaming there was water in my roof, and that all my insulation was ruined and I had lost thousands of euros. So there you go, quite an interesting experience, and I wanted to share it with you. Once we got past the tarp problem, there was the what problem. That is, as you can see in these images, I explained it to you just before, but the what is simple. You put it in the machine, it grinds, it goes through the pipe, you blow, and that's it. On the package of Cellulose Watt, there's a small chart that tells you if you want an R value of 9, for an area of 100 square meters, you need 73 bags, I think, so I have 120 square meters. I do the math, I take a 10% margin, that's just how I am, I always take a 10% margin. I plan ahead, you see, we get to the site, it's cool, I have enough insulation, enough cellulose, everything's fine, we put in the insulation, and then we finish. Around 1 o'clock, we've done half the roof, and then we say, damn, we've really worked hard. 3/4 of the insulation you bought, Julian, 3/4, and you've only done half the roof? So I think there's a calculation problem. Damn, because the machine, you rent it by the day, it costs 150 euros, so you don't want to rent it for an extra day. And then all your friends came to help you that day, so you can't just say, well, never mind, we'll continue tomorrow, and I'll buy more in the meantime. No, it's now or never. I had to buy an extra 1,000 euros worth of watts, bringing my total to 1,250 euros worth of watts. So 1,250 kilos, and I had to buy more. 750 extra kilos. I bought wadding for euro 1,000. The wadding I purchased was much more expensive at euro 1,250, and I had to buy an additional 750 worth. I mean, I asked every professional I could, did I make a mistake? Was it my fault or what? Was it that I hadn't ground it enough in the machine? Was there a problem? Everyone says it's impossible to make a mistake with cellulose wadding. It has to be the manufacturer's chart the wadding, right? That's wrong. So, it's great because I went from 1,250 euros per watt to 2,250 in just a few hours. I hadn't planned for that in my budget. Otherwise, as for the watt, we started with a technique where we put the oriented strand boards and blew from underneath. Why did I use this technique? Because I was afraid the wind would blow away the cellulose insulation. Blowing the insulation was a terrible mistake because it kept coming right back in my face. I have a sty, not visible on camera, due to irritation from cellulose insulation. I thought it was a very bad idea, but then decided to try it out. I put the insulation all over the roof. The wind was actually very weak, so it didn't blow the insulation away. It was a much better technique. It also allowed me to see much better how many centimeters of insulation I was putting down. All in all, it took us a day from 8 in the morning to 6 in the evening, let's say, with just a very short break in between. To insulate the entire roof and close it up in the evening, of course, with the tarp to protect the insulation overnight and be able to continue the next day. But it's not over, and we keep going the next day. We continue with step 3, which is closing up our framework, because you see, we have our beams, we have the insulation, but I can't leave the roof like that. I need to close it up with oriented strand board, so I got 18mm oriented strand boards, 250 by 67 millimeters. There you go, making sure that it rests properly. Of course, the beams, so that brings a bit of calculation to make sure, the beams are properly positioned. Every 50 centimeters, I forgot to mention this, but every 50 centimeters there's a beam on the roof. So that the oriented strand boards are properly laid on top and can support the entire load that will come from the waterproof tarp afterward. Plus the vegetation, plus the rainwater and all that. It took us a whole day to put up all these oriented strand boards, to cut them to the right size and to screw them in. And we finally have a flat roof. You can see it in the footage, so the roof is closed now and it looks like a wooden roof. The cellulose insulation is inside, the framework is nice and dry, the insulation is nice and dry, and the tarp can go over the top to protect it. So, Everything is great, but it's not finished yet. That means now we have to keep going. This project took 6 or 7 days in a row, non-stop, because I didn't want to leave the roof like that for weeks or days. With the temporary tarp, you know, I wanted to get as much done as possible, as quickly as possible, to put on the permanent tarp to protect the 2,250 worth of cellulose insulation and keep it dry. Even though it's one of the cheapest types of insulation, it's still a lot of money. So it's this oriented strand board roof. Now, we need to put an ethylene propylene monomer tarp to waterproof all of this, but that will be the subject of the next video. I'll explain the entire installation of this tarp in detail. Because there's a lot to talk about. It was also quite an adventure. Conclusion of this video. I had 2 criteria at the beginning, convenience and price. Was it a good practical idea? Was it easy? I have to say, it was really tough for me. Let's be honest, it was a lot harder than I thought. Many nights I couldn't sleep out of fear that the water would come in. That's the gist of it. It was complicated, as I did it in late autumn and early winter, and it rained constantly. And that was 90% of the difficulty, really. Carrying the wood to the roof, assembling it, and ensuring a 5% slope. All that at the limit. It was funny. Honestly, it was funny. Looking back, and even at the time, it was funny. Being afraid that the rain would ruin everything wasn't funny. When you're on your site and it's raining, then there's sun. But at least there's a nice rainbow. Look, it's doing all that, the rainbow. There you go. I can see it better than you, but I'm happy. There you go. There's a nice rainbow with my little drill. Look, isn't that an idyllic setting? It's not perfect. Please stop raining. But let's return to the ease factor. That was really easy, I'd say. It took a few days, but it was fine. Working flat is very pleasant, just as expected. A flat roof is much easier to build than a sloped roof, even though I haven't built a sloped roof. But now I'm wondering, was it a good idea in terms of cost? At this point, I have to admit, I think I made a bit of a mistake, and maybe I should have asked more carpenters, more people, but I don't know. I'll break down the cost of what this whole project cost me. There is 3,000 euros for beams, 150 euros for brackets to hold the beams, 250 euros for screws, 550 for 15mm oriented strand board to make the flooring, 1,250 euros for cellulose insulation, plus 1,000 euros for insulation that I had to buy later, 150 euros for blower rental, and 1,650 euros for oriented strand board. 18mm, which gives us a total of 8,000 euros. 8,000 euros already. I find that expensive, but on top of that, in these 8,000 euros, there's still no price for the waterproofing tarp, and there's no price for everything else that will be needed. Finishing, landscaping, and everything else I'll show you in the next video on this channel. So, subscribe to see the final price of this roof, but already 8,000 euros, that really hurt me. But maybe you'll tell me that's normal for the price of a roof, but I think a sloped roof would have been cheaper. Why? Because maybe I wouldn't have needed to close it up with oriented strand board and I wouldn't have needed to put on a tarp. I could have put metal sheets, steel or something else directly, which probably would have cost less, but maybe would have brought other complications that would have been less efficient thermally. I'll admit this video is simply me sharing my experience as there's an overwhelming amount of data. I admit that when it comes to the roof, my roof is well done. I think that everything I did is good, it will last over time, it's all neat and everything, but I clearly make mistakes due to lack of knowledge. My green flat roof solution is not the most optimal. But from all the research I did, from all the professional advice I got, this is the solution that came out and seemed the most optimal to me at the time I did it. But don't copy me exactly, do your own thing. Be inspired by it, ask professionals again, and find your own solution that is optimal for you. What am I saying? We're coming to the conclusion of this video. Share your thoughts in the comments. I hope you still got a fairly broad overview of this project. Even though it wasn't really a tutorial, I didn't explain to you how to calculate a 5% slope, which is actually really dumb. Just Google it, you'll find it fast. At least here, it gives you more of an overall feedback from experience. I really wanted to share that with you. If you have questions, ask them in the comments. I'll happily answer. Let's continue this video in the comments. I'll provide a lot more technical details there. I'm adding many technical details and information about natural materials in the video description. So go read the description. If you found this project interesting and want to know more, go read the comments, subscribe, and check out our Instagram and TikTok. Above all, we make a lot of short videos that present things to you in a more concise way, so you might be interested. I'll see you in 2 or 3 weeks, depending on how the project progresses, let's say in 2 weeks, to watch the next video about waterproofing the roof with the ethylene propylene DNA monomer tarp. Thanks for watching until the end. I'm Julian. Tired but happy this project will soon be done. See you very soon on this channel. Goodbye.